Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us for this replay of the lecture that I gave several weeks ago to the Croatian devotees. Many devotees apparently wanted to watch that, but with the translation, most English speakers don't have the patience to sit through that. So we're doing it again today, English only. And we hope that it will be easier for everyone to accommodate. So we're going to speak about Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, and this topic is coming up again at this time because of the actions of Naveen Krishna and Dhir Govinda Prabhus, who have recently, I think it was September 16th, they released a letter to everyone. And in that letter, they were explaining that the forensic sciences have increased in their effectiveness or their ability since everything was first discussed way back in the early 2000s. And so because of that, there's they were requesting the GBC that they all work together and have another look at the evidence, some of which they provided in that letter and on their website. Of course, this now coming out almost 25 years after the fact is new news for many devotees who have joined ISKCON since that time. And as it was the first go-around, it's both shocking, disappointing, and confusing. And for many devotees, what they do is they go through the 7 stages or 6 stages of grief, right? The first one of which is denial. Well, this couldn't have happened because what? Because Prabhupada was a pure devotee and Krishna wouldn't let that happen to a pure devotee, or Lord Nrsingadev would certainly have protected Srila Prabhupada, or everybody that was there, they were very devoted to Prabhupada, and they certainly couldn't have done that, and nobody else could have done that, and so on and so on. And so they come up with many reasons why that could not have happened. Well, I want to submit to you that this is a crime. If it happened, this is a crime. And being a crime, we have to look for persons with a motive, persons who have possibly could have done it, the motive for doing it, and the evidence that it was done. So, but more than that, in this case, there's even much more. We have to consider the circumstances, or let's say put everything in the proper perspective. And generally when we're, for most people who are looking at this crime, they're looking at the last event that took place in a series of events. The last event, of course, was committing the act, but it's a series of acts that took place long before that. And in this lecture, what I want to do is present the other circumstances, the other things that we need to consider when looking at this so that we can evaluate it in a proper way and we can look at the evidence in a proper way. So what we're going to do is zoom out for a high level view. And zooming out will take us back 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, it was the time when the demonic elements were kicked out of the heavenly planets, and they came and took refuge here on the earth. This is recorded in the Mahabharata, and of course, even in the Christian book. Of course, at that time, they gave such, they created so much trouble that Mother Bhumi went to appeal to Lord Brahma for help. And Lord Brahma then went to the shore of Svetadweep, sent a message by heart transmission to the Lord of Svetadweep, and the message came back. Krishna said, I am going to come personally and take care of this problem, which he did. And we read about those wonderful pastimes of the Lord in the Srimad Bhagavatam and Srila Prabhupada's summary, the Krishna book. Now, this sets the scene for everything that's going on in Kali Yuga. And we have to, let's say, we cannot try to understand anything that's going on in the world today without seeing everything in relationship to that background. Because those same demonic personalities who were running roughshod over the earth 5,000 years ago, they are still in charge. Yes, many of them were killed at the Battle of Kurukshetra, but not all of them. And since then, they have reconstituted their numbers, and they have been in control of this world ever since. And to see that, all we have to do is look at the history of the Western civilizations in particular, in which they tried to create large empires, making war against conquering the neighboring peoples, and so on. And every Western civilization has been doing that ever since. And today's situation is no different. So the demons, they are running this world. And there's, especially at this time, there's a great deal of evidence to see that in every sphere of life. But not everybody's looking at that. So we're not going to go there. That's a little diversion. The evidence is there. But what we're going to do is refer then to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in his wonderful essay entitled Putana, sometimes titled Institutional Religion. But there in that essay, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta reveals some very, very important things. And let me pull it up. Now, if you haven't read this, I strongly urge everyone to read this. It's I've of course included it in my book, Divine or Demonic: Spiritual Movements and the Enemies Within. And this is quoted in the second chapter. And I'm just going to read some highlighted parts of this to give us an understanding of how we should see and understand this world and what the demons are actually like. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he writes, King Kamsa is the typical aggressive empiricist, ever on the lookout for the appearance of the truth for the purpose of suppressing him before he has time to develop. Okay, the demons are in control of the world. They want to run it their way, and they have a natural repugnance for the absolute, for Krishna, for God. So they're looking to see, they don't want it to even get a start. He writes later, there are historical grounds for such misgivings. If the empiric domination, what we call materialism, is to be preserved intact, it would be necessary not to lose a moment to put down the transcendental heresy the instant it threatens to make its appearance in earnest. Of course, heresy, the transcendental heresy, it's heresy to materialism. But so what he's saying, the moment that any mention of the absolute truth threatens to make its appearance, they want to try to eliminate it as soon as possible. And this is no exaggeration. Okay. And he writes also that lexicographical interpreters, a good way of saying editors, are employed by Kamsa in putting down the first suspected appearance of any genuine faith in the transcendental. So this means scripture, that this scriptures, they give information about the absolute truth, about God, about the transcendental. And Kamsa employs these lexicographical interpreters for the purpose of editing those scriptures so that nobody can understand the truth as it is presented. Further down, he writes, Kamsa is strongly persuaded that faith in the transcendental can be effectively put down by empiricism, materialism, if prompt and decisive measures are adopted at the very outset. He attributes the failure of atheism in the past to the neglect of the adoption of such measures before the theistic fallacy, has had time to spread among the fanatical masses. Of course, in this writing, we're seeing the mentality of the materialists, the atheistic materialists. And then further, the last thing that I read from here is that the church that has the best chance of survival in this damned world is that of atheism in the convenient disguise or guise of theism. So this is no exaggeration. This is how the demons think. So they've been able to do that. In my book, Divine or Demonic, Spiritual Movements and the Enemies Within, I begin that book with examples from Jesus and his followers in first century Palestine, giving evidence that they were not Christians as we typically think of Christians today, but by evidence coming from first century itself in the Nag Hammadi texts and the Dead Sea Scrolls, that direct evidence from them tells us that they were in fact Vaishnavas. And what happened when the demonic civilization of the time came in contact with them? The Romans, that demonic civilization, the demons at that time, that was the Roman civilization. They were, of course, invading and trying to conquer everyone. But they had a very difficult time conquering the Middle East or Palestine, because the Vaishnavas, they weren't having it. They were xenophobic. They wanted to be rid of the Romans, and particularly they would not submit to the Romans' requirement. Now, one of those requirements was that the Romans allowed anybody they conquered to be able to continue to have their religion and worship as they had been doing. However, they required that the image of the Caesar be placed on their altar. In other words, they required everybody to worship the Caesar. Well, of course, you know, the demons, they want to be God. They want to be worshipped as God, and that was their requirement. So the Vaishnavas, the Vaishnavas weren't having it. They would not worship the Caesar as God because they understood he was not God. And of course, then the actual history is that the Romans tried again and again to get the Palestinians, or the Jewish Vaishnavas, as I call them, to capitulate. But finally, they just decided to end it all. And it was not Jesus and 12 disciples, but their numbers were so great that it took the Roman army an entire 7 years to conquer them. This is how they were dealing with the appearance of the absolute truth in the first century. So now fast forward to the 20th century. The absolute truth again makes its appearance, this time in 20th century America, with one elderly gentleman from India coming to New York, preaching and gathering a few followers. It would appear to be a sneak attack, maybe as you might call it in popular parlance, that in the capital of the demons, New York City, comes one saintly man, Srila Prabhupada, and he begins to teach about the absolute truth right at the heart of their empire. So what do? What is the modern method of dealing with these things? The Romans, if somebody did something or was saying things they didn't agree with, they would simply kill them. Well, in the 20th century, those methods aren't so agreeable. But there are other methods that they use. And I'll give you an example from my own personal experience, what that is. I stayed 5 years. I lived 5 years in Ukraine. And with a group of Ukrainian devotees, we were developing a village community with the idea of establishing a demonstration of my concept of spiritual economics, which means accepting that Krishna is the owner of everything, and everything should be done as for his service and offered to him for his satisfaction. This idea is what I call spiritual economics. So we were attempting to put that into practice as a gift economy with Krishna at the center and all of activities based on devotional service. So I would have to leave Ukraine every 6 months for visa reasons, and I used to go to the closest country was Moldova. Now in Moldova, when the Soviet Union fell, there was one oblast, or little state, I guess you would call it in our terms, that they didn't want to stay with Moldova. They wanted to remain aligned with Russia. And there was a Russian army down there, so there was a small war. And these people had the right to, won their right to remain aligned with Russia. This place is called Transnistria. So I would go to Transnistria for going out of Ukraine every 6 months and then coming back in. So because this is a very small area, everybody gets to know each other. And the temple president there got to know the person who was in charge of their intelligence services. And this person, of course, was trained by the KGB in Soviet Russia. So when I was going there, I got to know him also. And one day he asked me, please explain to him what I was doing. And so I explained the concept of spiritual economics and how we were trying to establish that. He listened very attentively to me. And the first thing that he said to me afterwards was, how are you going to protect yourself? Which was surprising to me. I mean, protect ourselves from what? His reply was very instructive. He said, the powers that be will not like what you are trying to do. The first thing they will do is send somebody within your group to try to create a lot of trouble and destroy you from within. If they fail at that, what they'll do is make a lot of bad propaganda about you so that people reject you, and they'll try to destroy you that way. And if that fails, they'll come and destroy you physically, which immediately I remembered the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. So I said to him, what? We're not even 10 people here. What kind of threat can we be to the world? You know, we're going to upset their empire, 10 small people. He said, they won't even let you get a start. So just like King Kamsa, the typical empiricist is ever on the lookout for the appearance of the absolute truth for the purpose of suppressing him before he has time to develop. So that was instructive. And this is, in fact, how they run the world today. The Soviet Union had a branch called the Fifth Chief Directorate. And the purpose of this group was to infiltrate everybody. And so all the alphabet, all the spy agencies, they do this. They infiltrate everyone. With what? For the purpose of what? Controlling it from within. That's a lot easier than trying to confront people and to somehow or other force them to do what you want. They infiltrate, they get up, they work their way up to the top levels of the hierarchy, and then they control everything that way. This is common practice in the way the world runs today. And there are many books written about this. If you don't accept this, please educate yourself, because this is exactly how they run the world. So, what did they do in the case of Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada? They infiltrated. Our movement has been infiltrated, and evidence of this has come to me in many places of the world. For some reason or other, devotees would feel comfortable confiding with me about this. And in Poland, in Russia, and here in the United States, devotees would come and tell me about these kinds of infiltrations. One that we know very well about, it's not conjecture or any kind of, maybe or probably, but back in the early 70s, a group of devotees in Los Angeles temple, they fancied themselves to be Kshatriyas, and they would go to a local gun range and practice target shooting. So they got to know the manager of that shop. They were friendly with him. One day, one of the devotees got a call from him. He said, I'm taking my family and leaving the country because the FBI wants me to infiltrate your group. But I think you're good people. I like you, and I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to leave. But you should know that they are doing this, and they'll certainly send somebody else. Okay. That's one case. The first time I went to Russia, I met one of the first Russian devotees who had been in psychological prison. And they had told him in prison that the KGB had infiltrated our movement in New York all the way up to the GBC. The same thing was told to Tapapunja Prabhu when he was in prison as well. Maybe different details, but those aren't the only cases. Anyway, there's many more, and I include them in the book. So they infiltrated our movement for the purpose of what? Controlling it from within. And the thesis of my book is that, exactly as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, for the purpose of destroying the absolute before he has time to develop. So that's the thesis of my book. Our movement has been infiltrated, not for the purpose of what? Not destroying it, but changing it so that the transcendental potency is lost. And of course, we can see that going on with the books and so on. Now, as we're talking about how the demons control the world, besides infiltration, there's something else to be considered. There's a professor at St. Petersburg State Agricultural University. His name is Yefimov, and on YouTube, there's a video of him instructing the KGB about these different weapons that are used to control people. I put that video on my YouTube channel. The very important thing to understand here is that we typically think of governments controlling people or the use of weapons of war to control people. But besides that, there's another 5 different instruments that they use, or what might be called management tools, tools for managing the people. And they are genetic weapons, meaning drugs, alcohol, and so on, economics, ideological weapons, such as different ways that people think, could be religion, historical, understanding that, as Orwell has said, he who controls the past controls the present, and he who controls the present controls the future. So history is a weapon, and we know that they have changed that. And then the most powerful weapon of all, worldview. Now, what's very important to understand is that Srila Prabhupada comes along, and he is a threat to each of these 5 most powerful methods of controlling people. Genetic weapons, don't take any drugs, alcohol, right? Economic weapons, live simply, produce your own necessities. Ideological weapons, right? The Vedic, let's say, ideological weapons, the understanding of religion, our understanding of Vaishnava theology, historical weapons. Certainly, the Srimad Bhagavatam gives us an extremely different history than the modern world controllers. And then the most powerful weapon, worldview. Srila Prabhupada has given us a worldview that allows us to understand how they are manipulating and destroying the world. So Srila Prabhupada was a huge threat to the established powers because he threatened their most powerful methods of controlling this world. So when they want to, when there's a war, you're at war with your adversary, you try to infiltrate their group to learn all their secrets and perhaps control them from within. What else do? You take out the leadership. We saw this several weeks ago with the Israelis, right? They bombed some building. They took out 8 or 10 of the leadership of Hezbollah all at one time. So this is a common tactic in war. You take out the leader. Now, many devotees, they say, well, why would anybody poison Prabhupada? Because he's elderly man, he is 81 years old. His death was fait accompli. It wouldn't be long before he would die of a natural death. So there's no purpose for anybody to take him out. But let's go back and let's remember how strong our movement was in 1977. Hare Krishna was a household word. Everybody in North America and in Europe knew the Hare Krishna movement, thanks in large part to George Harrison. Right, the Hare Krishna single became a #1 hit. So everybody was playing that song. Everybody loved it. George Harrison, right, My Sweet Lord, he made Hare Krishna's song famous by that. So, it's not. So we have to remember that Hare Krishna was a big, big threat. And again, keeping in mind Kamsa's words, right? Putting down any hint of the transcendental before he has time to develop. So it's not unlikely that they would want to remove Srila Prabhupada as early as possible, because we were growing so strong. Now, if we see everything, again, in this perspective, beginning back with understanding, realizing that this world is controlled by the demonic elements for the purpose of their own satisfaction, for their own sense gratification, and the fact that they have an abhorrence for the absolute and try to destroy him before he has time to develop. If we keep everything in that perspective, it's not surprising that they would try to take out Srila Prabhupada. Then who would do it? Well, obviously those who were closest to him. Now we remember also, right, after Srila Prabhupada's departure, we had so many tragic events in our society. But one thing that was very curious was that many of the leaders were not seen chanting their rounds. In fact, the GBC even passed a resolution that the GBC and the leaders, they had to publicly chant their rounds. Okay, well, why is that? Let's just stop a minute and think. If they were imposters and they were infiltrators, they didn't have any interest actually in Krishna consciousness, and trying to sit there and fake chanting for 2 hours, that's a lot of trouble, right? If you're not interested in it. But they weren't doing it. So there's a piece of evidence. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that if it's all put together, gathered together, that we can understand that something is not right. Another piece of very curious circumstantial evidence is if we look at the room conversations, if we read the room conversations of Srila Prabhupada's last days, particularly the time when he wanted to go on parikram around Govardhan by bullock cart. And Lokanath Maharaj, who was doing padayatra in India at that time, he asked Lokanath Maharaj, please arrange a bullock cart for me to go around Govardhan. And what happened? The devotees, there was an upcry. Oh, Srila Prabhupada, please don't do that. That will kill you. You're not in good health. That's too difficult a trip. It will kill you. And what was Prabhupada's reply? Oh, no. They said, that will be suicide. And Prabhupada replied, what? This is also suicide. Very telling. Then Tamal Krishna replies, so now, Prabhupada, you have to decide which suicide. a bold challenge. And what was Srila Prabhupada's reply? A famous quote from Ramayan, right, from Marichi. He is put in such a dilemma. And he said, Ram will kill or Ravana will kill. Better to be killed by Ram. That was Srila Prabhupada's reply, indicating that the people he was with were Ravana, that they were killing him. That's as straightforward as a accusation as you can get. And of course, Srila Prabhupada also stated at that time that I am being poisoned. Now, here's another curious event in the room conversation. What would you do if you were present and Srila Prabhupada said, I am being poisoned? You'd be in shock. Who? What? You know, and you'd take immediate measures to try to protect him. But what did they do? Nothing. Their reaction is very telling. They tried to deflect the conversation. Oh, yeah, well, so-and-so else was killed. Oh, yeah, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, somebody gave him poison too. No shock, no immediate, who did it? Instead of saying, who did it? What's tumult? What's his reaction? Who told you that, Srila Prabhupada? So these things are very telling. If we stop to look at the circumstantial evidence that surrounds Srila Prabhupada's passing, if we stop to consider the historical situation, the circumstances that this world is in, and how this world operates, it's not such a far-fetched fantasy. In fact, it's even logical, unfortunately. So, yes, it was a tragedy. Now, I want to make it very clear, I am not saying that Srila Prabhupada was killed by poison, that they assassinated him. No. My position is that they gave him poison with the intention of killing him, but Prabhupada, it was up to him when he would leave. I was in Gitanagari in 1977, and we would get news of what was going on in Vrindavan from devotees who came back from Vrindavan. Naturally, one of the first landing places would be New York, and Gitanagari was the New York farm. So we would get the tapes that would come from the devotees. So they would perhaps come to New York, they would give a lecture explaining what was going on. That would be recorded, and we got those recordings. So I have a tape that I titled, Prabhupada Can Stay or Leave. So at one point, Prabhupada had stopped eating, and he was saying, there's no point in eating, I should go. And the devotees were begging him, Srila Prabhupada, no, don't leave us, we need you, don't leave us. So then Prabhupada says, oh, well, okay, and very nonchalantly says, all right, if you want me to stay, bring me something to eat. So that's the way I understand it. Prabhupada could stay or go. It was up to him. Life and death is up to Krishna, and as Krishna's pure devotee, Krishna was giving Prabhupada the option, stay or go. But when he realized and understood that he was being given poison, that he had lost control of these leaders, what's the point in staying? Might as well go. So Prabhupada chose to leave. That's how I understand it. Yes, this is a tragedy of the most immense proportions. But very interestingly, the evidence for this didn't come about immediately. The evidence first appeared 20 years later, 1997, just at the advent of the internet, where this news could be spread all around the world immediately. And that's what happened. First came with the whispers. Devotees were listening to those tapes of the room conversations in the last days, and they would hear whispers. The poison's going down. Did you put the poison in the milk? So if you want to hear, let's say if you're not biased, if you're not trying to control anything, if you listen carefully, you may hear exactly that. And many devotees do. So others will say, no, I don't hear anything. Well, the forensic analysis of voice now allows us to not only hear, to not only, let's say, define, to identify explicitly what sounds are being made, but also whose voice is saying them. There's such a thing as called voice imprint, and they're able now to take imprints of those voices, and they can understand exactly who was saying those words and what was being said. So the evidence is there, and the question is, will we look at it or not? Now, others devotees raised the point, well, this happened almost 50 years ago. What's the point of bringing it up now? Very good question. The point is to understand what is happening with our Hare Krishna movement, because the people who were involved at that time are still the people who are in charge of the movement at this time, minus 2 of them. And what's happening with the Hare Krishna movement? Why are we being forced to accept and distribute the adulterated books and not Srila Prabhupada's original books? Why are Srila Prabhupada's original books not being welcome in his own temples? What does that say? And of course, anybody who even now tries to repeat Prabhupada's words, they are not welcome in many ISKCON temples. So that if we look at the situation of ISKCON today, if we look at the historical situation, if we put all of this together, we can understand that our Krishna consciousness movement has been infiltrated for the purpose of destroying it from within. We may not see much evidence of that now, but what's it going to look like in 200 or 300 years? Right? What did they do with Jesus? They made a false religion out of him, a spiritually inept religion with no transcendental potency. With Paul coming along, so-called Paul, who was an enemy of the followers of Jesus and was killing them, and he changed the whole thing. Oh, you don't have to do anything. You just believe. So we can imagine in the future, oh, just believe in Srila Prabhupada. That's all you need, and you'll go back to Godhead. We don't know what it's going to be. We do know what we have. And for those of us who know what we have, it's our obligation to preserve it for posterity so that everyone in the future can get the pure teachings of the pure devotee and be able to promulgate that, to propagate it into the future for the purpose of saving the fallen conditioned souls of Kali Yuga. So my plea is that you please look at all of this evidence, consider everything from A to Z without jumping to conclusions based on sentiment. And yes, once one accepts this, they will have to go through the 6 stages of grief. Once you get past denial, there'll be a lot of tears to be shed. It will be a very difficult thing to accept. But then, standing in the reality of, but then standing in reality, one can act appropriately. One has to pay a price to know the truth. This is a world of illusion. Everyone is in an illusion of their own making. So do we want to give up our illusion and know the truth? If we do, we have to pay a price for that. That price is letting go of our comfortable illusion in which we think this world is a nice place and I can be happy here. It's not a nice place. It's not a place to try to enjoy. It's a place for doing our business and getting out. Okay, we'll end there, and perhaps somebody has some questions or comments.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just wanted to share an experience I had. And so when that book, first came out, maybe it was around 2000 or so.
Which book? Nityananda's book?
By Nityananda's book, yeah. So I read that book.
Somebody Has Poisoned Me.
Yes. So I read that book, and of course it was shocking. And so I read it, and I was, of course, thinking about it, and I was thinking, who can I talk to about this? And there was a devotee in Boston, Harvard scholar, who I'd been friends with for many years because I lived in Boston. And he was a devotee. I'd rather not mention his name because I honestly don't know where he's at right now with this topic. I haven't talked to him about it since then. But he knew this person, and he basically character assassinated him and didn't answer any of the points that were spoken of in the book. It was more, yeah, he's a nice devotee, but he's a little, disturbed. He's a little nutty. So anything he says, I can't accept. So that was the conversation. And I tried to mention, well, what do you think about when Prabhupada said I'm being poisoned? And then the response was, it couldn't have happened. Prabhupada was so powerful. He knew exactly what was going on. He's Sarvagya. He knows everything. He wouldn't let it happen. So after that conversation, I felt sort of empty. It wasn't a satisfying conversation. I was very disappointed because previously this person, I was into Yogananda before. He was into Yogananda. So we could talk about a lot of things that a lot of devotees don't talk about. And, it helped me in my growing as a devotee. But I felt very dissatisfied. So I opened up the Bhagavatam, and it was just one of those moments where I imagine we all do that from time to time. We just open it up, say, what does Krishna have to say right now? And what happened was truly amazing. And I'm just going to read this. It's not going to take long. It was first canto, chapter 18, verse 2. And this is literally the verse I opened to. It wasn't bookmarked. I just randomly opened up the Bhagavatam. And it said, furthermore, Maharaj Parikshit was always consciously surrendered to the personality of Godhead, and therefore he was neither afraid of death nor overwhelmed by fear due to a snake bird, which was to bite him because of the fury of a Brahmin boy. And the purport was incredibly telling. The self-surrendered devotee of the Lord is called Narayan Parayana. Such a person is never afraid of any place or person, not even of death. For him, nothing is as important as the Supreme Lord, and thus he gives equal importance to heaven and hell. He knows well that both heaven and hell are creations of the Lord, and similarly, life and death are different conditions of existence created by the Lord, but in all conditions and in all circumstances, remembrance of Narayan is essential. The Narayan Parayana practices this constantly. Maharaj Parikshit was such a pure devotee. He was wrongfully cursed by an inexperienced son of a Brahmin who was under the influence of Kali. And Maharaj Parikshit took this to be sent by Narayan. He knew that Narayan, Lord Krishna, had saved him when he was burned in the womb of his mother. And if he were to be killed by a snake bite, it would also take place by the will of the Lord. The devotee never goes against the will of the Lord. Anything sent by God is a blessing for the devotee. Therefore, Maharaj Parikshit was neither afraid nor bewildered by such things. That is the sign of the pure devotee of the Lord. So, of course, when I read that, it just blew my mind and I shed tears. And for me personally, it was confirmation for me that it happened, because it was a divine intervention. Krishna himself, Srila Prabhupada himself, to me in that moment revealed, yes, this could happen. Because many devotees, like you said, the first stage of denials, it couldn't have happened to Srila Prabhupada. And to me, this is a glorification of Prabhupada, how surrendered he was and how fearless he was. So for me, that helped me adjust to how could this have happened. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's, I think that will help many who see this video to see it in relationship to that. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Anybody else?
Right, Maharaj, thank you for the presentation. Very vital information. I enjoyed your book, and you got a lot of nice facts in there. And the Hidden Glories books that the Truth Commission has put out has really opened my eyes to so much evidence, overwhelming evidence. I hear you speak. You're the first one who I really caught the term Palena Parichate, judged by the result. And it's so overwhelming, the evidence, and that I'm a newer devotee. I didn't come to Krishna consciousness till 2003 or so. I started practicing, but it's just looking at the facts. And you spoke how they wanted to eliminate Prabhupada, of course, and also to just bury his instruction for the how to run his movement after his departure. They just sort of changed everything. So it's just obvious, and you spoke of they were made aware of the poisoning. They didn't call the police, no blood tests, no authorities that were called at all. They didn't dig any deeper than just to, express a little bit of shock. It's all just so shocking to hear all these things come, but the open discussion that we're having here, this is what needs to be done. Since I've joined ISKCON, it's never been, nobody's allowed to talk about it, because all these things would come to light and it would be overturned. The GBC would have some real heat put on them, but how can that happen now? How can we really make some change? Just discussing it like we're doing seems to be the only route now. You can't really just go and challenge them somehow. I guess with what Naveen and Krishna and Dear Govinda have done is at least put something on the table for them to try to answer. Anyway, thank you.
Well, yeah, in regard of what to do, I don't know if you've read my book, but it's very simple, really. They've created an institution out of ISKCON, which Srila Prabhupada never wanted. He never wanted an institutional arrangement. And with this institutional arrangement, they've also created a top-down hierarchical control in which the GBC have absolute control over everything, including initiations. If you want to be initiated, you have to take an oath of allegiance, not to Prabhupada, not to your guru, but to the GBC, et cetera, et cetera. So they've changed everything, but That doesn't make any difference at all because it is a voluntary society and Srila Prabhupada's instructions are there. All we have to do is simply ignore the GBC and follow Srila Prabhupada. It's very easy. They have no power over any of us unless we give our power away to them. So the instructions are there. We know what to do. This is not rocket science, right? Invite people into your home, chant Hare Krishna, read from Bhagavad Gita, and share prasadam. What is the difficulty, right? So what we need to do, what I see the value of this is creating a clarion call to everybody to wake up, realize what's going on, and then get back on track of starting the Hare Krishna movement again, so to speak, by simply doing what Srila Prabhupada asked us to do. Not difficult at all. Oh, okay, we have a new person here joining us. Great. Butter Narayan Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
I was putting I was putting a number in wrong, so my humble apologies. I'm sorry I missed so much of it. Hey, can I ask? Somehow I think my picture is sideways, but I wanted to ask I don't know if this has been asked because I've missed so much of it, but I wonder if you could address the regarding the Srila Prabhupada's disappearance, the interview with Abhiram and Abhiram's statements, which seem to be contrary to the research that Naveen and his crew have done. Has that been discussed at all?
No, I haven't brought that up. I haven't discussed it. Okay, I have to admit, first of all, I haven't read, if you're referring to something recently that he's written, I haven't read that.
It's more or less from the video that the GBC put out to, so-called counter the poison narrative, which was called Deception.
Oh,
and in that Abhiram has written Agora a number of times in this regard. And so, yeah, that's.
Although I haven't, okay, I've seen that video years ago. And I know Abhiram's position because he was there. He was functioning as Srila Prabhupada's nurse at the time. And
Correct.
So I remember his one statement, if it did happen, they would have to be the very best actors because all I saw was, I'm paraphrasing, of course, all I saw was the most loving care being given to Srila Prabhupada. So with all due respect to Abhiram Prabhu, I have great respect for him as a Vaishnava, and because, again, we see the world through our own lens of our own perception. And not all of us can see things as they are. There's so much that is withheld from us. And so we understand that we all live in a world of illusion. Some of it's illusion of our own creation, and some of it's illusion of others, or let's say the illusion we've been given that we buy into. There's certainly many devotees who will not accept this idea in any way, and okay, what can be done? That's up to them. My purpose is not in trying to convince anybody against their will. And my purpose is not to try to force everybody to believe what I believe. My purpose is simply to help everyone understand that this mission has gone off track from what we had when Srila Prabhupada was with us in the 70s. And I've written an entire book to explain how I see what happened to our wonderful Hare Krishna movement. And the solution is simple, that we simply do what Srila Prabhupada asks us to do without paying any attention to the GBC and those who are misleading everyone. Not everybody's going to agree with that. Okay, that's all right. And but to simply make ad hominem attacks, to attack the messenger instead of dealing with the message, we all know that this is a diversionary tactic, or let's say it's something that's done for people who have cognitive dissonance. And certainly there are going to be many who will have cognitive dissonance over this entire issue. It's just, for some, it's beyond their ability to grasp or to accept. Okay, God bless them. I have no argument with them. Okay, my argument is for those who are bewildered, confused about what they see, what's going on in a Hare Krishna movement. I'll give you a small anecdote about that. Bhakti Vikash in India one time, some devotees that came to him and they said, yes, we've been chanting Hare Krishna, we've been, by our own for about 2 years, and finally we made it to one of the temples, but now we're a little confused. And they asked him, so what should we do? Should we do what Srila Prabhupada told us to do in his books, or should we do what they're telling us to do at the temple? Okay, what's that say? Right? Who's the Acharya here? Right? Srila Prabhupada is the Acharya, and he is the person that we accept as giving us Krishna consciousness and guiding us in all the way back home, back to Godhead. So believe what you want, do what you want, that's okay. I have no argument with that. However, for those who are bewildered by what they see going on in ISKCON and how it's deviating from Srila Prabhupada, there's a good reason. And if you haven't read my book, I encourage you to read my book. I'm putting it out for free on my webpage. And it's also going to be a link will be there on Naveen Krishna's webpage as well. And I'll make it available to others. And if you do happen to get the PDF, please feel free to share it. Padanaran, back to you. Anything else? Can't hear you. You're muted.
No, the points you're making are very good, very similar points to what Rupa Yoga makes. I think there's parallel paths here in that, on one hand, you have the instructions of Srila Prabhupada, and you have the aspects of the ISKCON leadership that are some following, some not following. You could say that there's a general sense of deviation, but then there are devotees that are sincerely endeavoring to follow. I'm thinking of a statement that Prabhupada told to Giriraj Swami. Of course, we know Giriraj Swami is going through something now very interesting. But it was in regards, and trying to remember the exact statement, it was something about, Giriraj Swami asked Prabhupada, what if I don't agree with my god brothers? How should I deal with this? Prabhupada said, you try to cooperate, work things out. He said, well, what if I can't? He said, well, what if I disagree with how they're doing things? He said, just don't leave, try to fix it. So there's that understanding that, to work, it's just kind of like the analogy of the United States of America. We see the very profound mission drift and the infiltration of a kind of a socialist, Marxist, globalist ideology, and not only ideology, but in real time, the destruction of the values of the founding fathers. So there are many, say, patriotic, God-conscious, to some degree, people that rather than abolishing the United States, they're like, no, we have to fix it. This is what was given by the founding fathers. It's our job to restore it, just like they just had in DC, the end of September, the Restore the Republic rally, a lot of very powerful speakers, including RFK Jr., Brett Weinstein, Tulsi Gabbard, etc. So I'm just playing the devil's advocate here. because, you know, I more or less agree in principle, but as a devil's advocate, there is the restore the republic or restore ISKCON. So on one sense, we can work independently to embody Srila Prabhupada's teachings. And as you say, just like Rupanuga's point is, hey, just try to establish Krishna consciousness in the homes of whoever we meet, you know, the essential Namhata program at the original teachings. But then there's the point that I'm making here as a devil's advocate. Somehow to work within the institution, not to abandon it, but to help restore it. So perhaps you could address that dynamic.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for that. And that's a very important point. Sadly, devotees have been trying to assist the GBC to get back on track for 50 years unsuccessfully. We may remember back in the 90s, Kundali Prabhu wrote a series of books, Our Mission, in which he was earnestly trying to say that we've gotten off track, that we've got some mission drift here. We need to get back on track. And he was saying that in good faith that, you know, yes, if the leaders, they see that, or if they reflect on that, that they would correct course, but they didn't. There have been devotee after devotee who've made suggestions and so on, but you know, sadly, here's a telling thing: the GBC have set themselves up to be unassailable. They are not obligated. There's nothing in ISKCON law that requires them to address or respond to allegations or complaints of the rank and file devotees. And so, I mean, it would be good if there was, and we might be able to see some constructive course corrections, but that's not there. So for me, I'm 76, I'm out of time, right? I don't know how much longer I've got on this planet. Younger devotees, if you're 50, 40 years old, go for it, see what you can do. And of course, don't give up, try to correct it. But my very, very important point, the institution is not Krishna consciousness. The institution is not ISKCON. ISKCON is Srila Prabhupada's instructions and what he gave us to do and asked us to do. That's what we have to do. Okay? The GBC have left ISKCON, in my opinion. Okay? It'd be nice if they would come back, and if you can help them to come back, that'd be great. But we have to understand clearly what ISKCON is. I put an entire chapter of that title in my book, understanding what is ISKCON, and ISKCON cannot be destroyed, it cannot be perverted, nothing. The pure teachings are there, the pure instructions are there. All we have to do is accept it and follow it. If others are going to deviate, and they will, there will be many who deviate. God bless them, let's try to help them, but everybody flies their own airplane back to Godhead. So let's be very clear on this. The GBC have left ISKCON. My question to everyone is, how far will the GBC deviate? How far will the GBC have to deviate from Srila Prabhupada before you will stop following them? And for many, of course, that point was crossed long ago, and they voted with their feet.
Maharaj, there is a little passage here, very well said, by the way. There's a passage concerning Abhiram here from the Hidden Glories book. I could read it if you'd like. It's just a paragraph.
Okay.
Caretakers such as Abhiram Das and his wife Shruti Rupa Dasi, who were with Srila Prabhupada in 1977, have said that if there was a poisoning, they would have seen something. They did not see it, so there was no poisoning. Abhiram was Srila Prabhupada's nurse for 83 days, July 25 to October 16, 77. But according to the hair test, the astronomical cadmium poison went on for maybe 300 days, starting 6 months before Abhiram began his nurse service and continued after he left. He was not on guard by Srila Prabhupada's bed 24 hours a day and was not watching all ways in which a poisoning could have been done. He did not suspect poisoning at the time and so was not watching out for it. Obviously, if someone was there at some of the time, this cannot negate the poisoning that occurred unseen to all, including Abhiram, which is proven by the hair test. Abhiram saying, I was there and I did not see any sign of poisoning proves nothing. Of course, it doesn't work like that. Would a poisoner allow those present to see what he was doing? Countless poison murder cases were unsuspected, but discovered many years after the death of the victim. And the evidence to prove the poisoning that was discovered later is invalid because someone who was there did not see the poisoning, just because that's what they say in the book.
Yeah, thank you for that. This book you're referring to, the Hidden Glory
Thank you.
series. I'm sorry? This is
Thank you for reading.
okay. These books are written by by Nityananda Prabhu, and he goes into great detail. I want to emphasize in my book, in the chapter about Srila Prabhupada's departure, I didn't go into great detail. Instead, I referred everyone to his books because he goes into great detail historically, and he goes back and looks at so much evidence. Butter and Ryan, you brought up that video. What was it called? By Maheshwar. Deception. Right. Well, unfortunately, he doesn't try to investigate anything. That video is simply a trying to show why it couldn't have happened. For example, he says, well, cadmium, that has a very obvious taste. If somebody put cadmium in Prabhupada's food, naturally he would taste it. Well, there are things called cadmium salts, which are poisonous, which are tasteless. So that's just an example. Again, we started out this presentation with the idea, okay, there's a crime. We have to consider who could have done it, what the motive was, and how it was done. Okay, so in my presentation today, I endeavored to give evidence that who would do it? The demons that run this world, they control everything by infiltration. And there's a lot of evidence our Hare Krishna movement was infiltrated. And my opinion is it was infiltrated for the purpose of destroying it from within. And the evidence is there for in so many different ways. Okay, we've been going on for quite a long time now. So unless there's
I have a quick question.
Okay.
I have a quick question. Just that you had mentioned, I just wanted to get an update, that you had mentioned that there's a new forensic audio that's coming out soon. And you said within a couple months, is that correct?
Yeah, my understanding is that Naveen's been working with those who do audio forensics, and they again, the science is greatly advanced. This is what he told me personally. The science has greatly progressed over what it was 25 years ago, because they can now get voice prints and so on. In terms of how or when that evidence will be released, I'm not privy to that, because when they put this letter out, they've given the GBC up until November 1st to respond to them. As I understand, to this date and time, there has been no response. So we'll have to see how it plays out. I don't know anything more than that.
So the things that we're hearing now are the original old recordings that have been cleaned up a little bit, but not super cleaned up.
I as far as how much they've been cleaned up, I don't know.
Okay.
I've not been working with Naveen on that, and I have no idea. Again, I suppose that we'll find out that information from Naveen when we get to that point.
Nima Chaitanya, are you saying that there's an additional recording that's coming out besides what was just recently released?
Apparently, Marge is saying that, yeah, there's an updated one that will be cleaned up more, you
I
know,
see.
that more up to date in terms of the technology that we have now, that will really, really be more conclusive proof of things. That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you all for joining me today, and thank you for having the courage to look at this objectively as much as possible. And again, this is a difficult thing for us all to have to go through. We all revere Srila Prabhupada. We all love Srila Prabhupada, and we hate to think that this can happen, but we must keep in mind, as Nimai, that sloka and purport that you read, Srila Prabhupada was completely surrendered to Krishna and was willing to accept whatever circumstances he was put in. And we look at all of Krishna's devotees, in Krishna's Bhoma Leela, they all went through difficulties, Mother Devaki having her children killed right in front of her just after birth, and so on. So what this means that we are in a struggle, that there's a struggle between the divine and demoniac, and we should not let go of that fact. This is the way this world is working, and as long as we're here, it will probably remain so. Again, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Is it possible to ask one question, Maharaj?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I saw too late. I'm from Serbia, from Belgrade. You remember probably from programs when you visited. Yes. It was
Yes,
2016.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Dharma's flat. Yeah. I'm very thankful for you, for your courage to brought this book in 2019, and I read it, and it, it helped me a lot to get puzzles together, because for years we were trying to fix some things like this, but it's beyond fixing, and I mean regarding institution like that, and the point is that Srila Prabhupada personally complained, and there is a reason why he complained. Probably he wanted to warn also, maybe also he wanted some action to be done there, which were not done, and everything was covered for decades practically. So I'm very thankful for your courage to bring this book up, and because obviously it influenced a lot your positions. And regarding this, I'm sorry that I was not able to listen your presentation today, because I saw it recently and tried to join but it was a bit late. So I want to ask you, is it possible to see actually your presentation somehow, what you spoke today?
I'll be putting this presentation on my YouTube channel within several hours.
Okay, so we can hear actually. Yeah. Thank you. It's very much important to understand properly this, and I'm very thankful also to other devotees. I read also in same year the book from Nityananda Prabhu, Kill Guru, Becoming Guru, and also Indira's book. Actually, I had the chance to read in that same year, which helped me a lot to made the correct decision, which is distant from an institution from that time. And this helped me a lot, because my relationship with Srila Prabhupada was again like connected, in the sense that I got some personal instructions from him through dream, which is completely different from all other since 1990 practiced till that time when I made such decisions to distance. So actually, your book helped for this reconnection with Srila Prabhupada.
Right. Thank you very much for your appreciation.
Thank you to all devotees, also to Gora Prabhu. I read different things because in 2020 we saw what rolled up and how the leadership reacted, which is I mean, outrageous, because they basically aligned with demoniac plan, which is disasters for many persons who unfortunately follow that worldwide. You know, many have died. You know, and like that.
That's another piece of important evidence that shows you
Yeah.
where leadership is.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for your comment.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
if you, I'm very happy to hear that you appreciate my book and that it helped you. If you can, get it translated into Serbian somehow for the other devotees.
Yeah, what I did, I shared with two persons which I'm connected, but it's a big challenge. I mean, to translate it, but we will keep that in the mind. You know.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.